Mr. Lloyd Gillett, the Regional Delegate to the Armed and Security Forces, ICRC. Mr. Gillett, known to us as Lloyd, in a previous lifetime served in the Belize Defence Force at the highest level of Chief of Staff, Belize Defence Force. In the ICRC, Lloyd has worked in different contexts, most recently in Iraq, and having served in India for just about 2 years. Lloyd's next mission is known, and as Chair, he will have the discretion to share with you more on that. I now hand over to Lloyd on the use of drones and contemporary armed conflict. Mr. Gillett.
Thank you, Charles, for that very kind and brief introduction. As Charles alluded to, my next mission will be on the other side of the line of control. So I'm starting today with moderating a discussion in India and in Pakistan. So in India today we have Dr. U.C. Jha. I will give his bio a little later, but on the Skype we have Dr. Sikandar Shah. And the topic, as Charles said, is the use of drones and contemporary armed conflict, how the changing frontline aligns with the traditional paradigm of IHL. And so the way we're going to proceed is I'll give a brief overview of the issues, and then Dr. Jha will give a presentation, and then we'll get Mr. Sikandar Shah on the phone, and he will give his presentation, and then we'll have a period for questions and answers. So the main issues with drones is a weapon, and the scope of application of IHL to drone strikes. And to be more specific, we will be talking mostly about armed drones, because 90% of the drones being used today are not armed. They're basically used for intelligence gathering, reconnaissance and surveillance. But it's that 10% that is armed that we're going to concern ourselves with. So in terms of substantive rules, there's no specific IHL rules that ban drones or allow drones. But drone is a weapon, and the principles of IHL, such as distinction, proportionality, and precautions, all apply. And it's prohibited for drones to deploy prohibited weapons like anti-personnel mines, biological agents, chemical weapons. But that is true for other weapon systems. And Article 36 of Additional Protocol 1, which states that new weapons must comply with the law, applies. So this is in the IHL paradigm when there's an armed conflict. Now, if IHL does not apply, then it is the use of force, or as we say, a law enforcement paradigm that applies. Now, there are strict legal limits imposed by this law enforcement framework or international human rights law. But under the basic principle of the use of force and firearms, deadly force can be used. And so in that strict legal regime, it is conceived that drones could be used. But again, it's a very strict legal regime. Now, the issues of concern are, one, respect for IHL. So the operator is far away from the battlefield. He presses a button. Of course, he's responsible for any violations of IHL, and the country that owns the drones and who this person is a member of, the armed forces, he would also be liable for any violations of IHL. Now, some of the worries is that because this person is far away from the battlefield, countries will be more prone to use drones in more contexts. So for civilians living far away from what would be a traditional battle area, they could become the victims of these drone strikes if they can become collateral damage. There's also the issue of the psychological effects, not only on the operator who is far away but still sees the result of the attack, but also the civilian population living in these areas where they are under the threat of a drone strike, because these things can stay up there for hours and hours. So 24 hours a day, there are drones flying overhead. And so this creates a problem for them. The drone operator, of course, if he's a civilian, he's directly participating in hostilities. If he's a member of the armed forces, then he's also liable to be attacked. Now, I think one of the things that you're going to hear in this debate today is the geographical scope of the application of IHL. In an international armed conflict, it's very simple. Countries can attack each other within their territorial boundaries and on the high seas. But in a non-international armed conflict, it's a bit more problematic. If there's a non-international armed conflict within a state, then the conduct of hostilities is governed by the law enforcement paradigm and also Common Article 3 and Additional Protocol 2 if the states have signed that. But there is this notion of a spillover. So if a conflict is occurring in state A and the forces that are fighting against the government are in state B, then there's some spillover of this conflict. How far into that country the spillover goes is a bit problematic. But also, one of the biggest thing right now is, for example, third states that get involved in an ongoing non-international armed conflict. Say, let's use an example of maybe Yemen, where you have a non-international armed conflict going on, and then you have a third state coming and doing drone strikes. That is a problematic part of the law. So one of the most debated issue is the use of lethal force against individuals who are directly participating in hostilities in a non-international armed conflict. So these might be members of non-state groups, and there's two schools of thought. One is that this individual takes the conflict wherever he goes. So, if this individual who's a member of a non-state armed group gets on a plane and goes to Sri Lanka, he takes the conflict there, and some states are saying we can target him there. Or if he goes to Belize, where I'm from, they're saying he can be targeted there as well. The ICRC does not believe that the individual can take the conflict wherever he goes, because then the whole world becomes a global battlefield. And so the ICRC feels that the conflict has to be confined within a certain dimensions, within a state, or there might be spillover. So with that overview, I'm going to ask Dr. Yusei Jia, and let me just introduce him. He's a retired wing commander, and he's a free man and an independent researcher. He has an extensive academic experience in the fields of international humanitarian law, human rights law, and military law. He has been teaching these subjects for more than a decade and is a resource person for the ICRC in its South Asia teaching sessions in IHL. He has worked on 9 books, and I have his most recent book, which is Drone Wars, Ethical, Legal, and Strategic Implications, and I recommend it. It goes through the history of the development of drones, and it talks even about the latest autonomous drones that are being developed. So I recommend it, and he told me I'll get a commission if we manage to sell some today. So with that short introduction, I'll ask Dr. Jia to give his presentation.
Thank you, Lloyd, for a nice introduction. At the onset, I'd like to thank Mary for inviting me for this talk here. The subject, as has been told by him, the use of drones. Use of drones in contemporary armed conflict, how the changing front line aligns with the traditional paradigm of IHL. Drones, we know from various names in different countries, like manned combat aircraft system, unmanned aerial vehicle in India, RPVs, micro aerial vehicles, force protection aerial surveillance system, and so on. But the word comes from an Old English word that drone is the main honeybee, stingless, performs no work and produces no honey. The only function it has got. I'm going to cover this talk for about 30 minutes and use two questions in this: whether the use of lethal drones has violated international law, particularly when we are using it in other countries' domain and without consent, or when there is no armed conflict. Second, whether the use of drone is violating IHL. And third one will be to whether use of drone is violating the IHL and adequacy of IHL, what we have, is it enough or some more changes are required, or we have to make every time new weapon comes up something new in IHL. It is not a new weapon, or it has been used since almost 170 years, and first use was done by Austrian attack, the Italian city of Venice, where unmanned balloons loaded with explosives were used. Unfortunately, this didn't work. Some of them were caught in air and thrown back to Austrian side. So, what was the system depending upon air has now been updated. Okay. Now today what we have got armed drones, they have got missiles and target, they can target any place where the drones are flying and from the distance as much as about 15 kilometers above the sky, and also they can drop bombs. They also do the function of intelligence gathering, surveillance, recognition, and any of the other missions of military. They give feedback, could be where the militaries are there or other forces are there, or whatever you require you can see in a camera sitting inside our room. It has got a various civil use. In fact, for almost 90% of the civil use, drones are being used. Drones are not new. Any aircraft can be converted into a drone. USS converted F-16, which are old, into a drone. We have been using those aircraft, old aircrafts, as a drone for a target system. I mean, these aircrafts are old or flown, and then they are used as target by any other aircraft. But those were unmanned versions of the drones. The reliance has been relatively very new phenomena. Started sometime in 2004, and they are now sending back the real-time data from the battlefield, which can be used for subsequent use of weapons against the enemy. And this information can be used to facilitate attack by ground forces. Suppose I see something in my drone, through my drone camera, I may not have to use a bomb from drone. I can use my military which is nearby the place, and the military can do a ground attack, or other aircraft can go and drop the bomb over the particular area. In that case means I will use drone only for surveillance. At the same time, I have facility to drop missiles or bombs from drone depending upon my requirement. They are of two types. One could be, which most of them return back to the base from where you have flown them, and second is self-destruct, in which they go over the target and destroy the target, and they can themselves get destroyed. Some of which India has procured are of the kind of self-destructing. What the US has been using is they come back to the base. More than 90 countries in the world have got in the militaries. More are trying to get it for the military use. And US has more than 7,000 drones in their armed fleet. And in the last 5 years, the number of training persons on drone piloting or drone monitoring has been much more than traditional fighter pilots which US used to induct. And they have now seen from last 10 years that the lethal power has enhanced much more. Person sitting in US almost 15,000 kilometers away from Afghanistan or Pakistan drop these bombs sitting and with no danger to him. And this is the operator, person who is actually using weapon, is away from battlefield. It has given rise to a lot of other factors, that he has no fear to life. He is using as a PlayStation mentality, that something like you are playing in one of the computers, some game. So when distance from the object also makes you that you may harm a person without having any harm to yourself. Something against the military ethics which have been earlier. And people have been operating armed drones, particularly in the US. The CIA has been using, and a military as well, where a number of persons have been affected by these armed drones. For the first time in Afghanistan, it was used armed drone, and Sea Wings and the of the US military as well as CIA, that the intelligence agency, is using this drone, and we have from the highest authority in the US, the presidents have been claiming that this use of drone has been in the self-defense in the global war on terror, and this has been continuing. Maybe sometimes slows down the effect. Otherwise, the latest was on 21st of April this year, when almost 55 persons in Yemen were killed by these drones. These are two types of drones. Just wanted to tell you, which the US is mainly using is the Predator and Reaper drones. Now, Predator has got missiles as many as 16 Hellfire missiles in one aircraft, whereas the Reaper drone can have missiles as well as 500-pound bombs on it. Depending upon what the payload you want, it can carry it. Remember, when they use a drone, drone base may be in Afghanistan or Pakistan, from where it is flown, and then the control is handed over to person sitting in US. Then he can fly, he can target the object, and he can ask it to land back in Afghanistan. At the altitude of almost up to 50,000 feet they can fly and remain for hours in sky. And remember one thing, that it is not a single drone is flown. When you say drone system, at one time around 4 drones are flown. We call CAP, Combat Air Patrol, and they circulate around the object and they are controlled on the ground. And with additional is that you have got number of persons employed it, and it may have as many as over 100 persons employed on that one cap of 4 drones. It is not that only one drone is flying and pilot is controlling it, the base. It is a huge system. A large number of persons are involved as compared to a fighter aircraft. And it can do anything once it's in the air. It can do good photography, gather electronic systems, and send photo back to the vehicle where the field commander is there, or attack using missiles or bombs. How the drone works, just show you a photograph in one of that. That the left side, if you see that the US base is there, through satellite they can control drone, say flying over Afghanistan or Pakistan. He can direct from there that missiles or bomb to be dropped. At the same time, he can hand over this information to ground commander, that so-and-so place we suspect or we cited an insurgent in particular vehicle going, and that the commander who is in there, or US commander near Afghanistan or Pakistan, can use other means to attack this insurgent or object of what we want to take them down. Why I have shown you this particularly? See, there is the involvement of satellite, and in this system, the satellite becomes military objective. So in the future warfare, when the two parallel equal countries are fighting, the satellite also becomes a target of attack in case both the countries are using drones. In the case of Afghanistan and Pakistan or Yemen, where this have been used, in fact, there is no air defense system to compete or to equal the US forces. So US is having a monotony over that area. There is no retaliation from any of the countries because of high technology being used by the US. So in the contemporary war, where the two equals are involved, possibility of drone use, in my view, is very negligible. And in this countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, they have been used by the US military and CIA. And though it is very difficult to get reliable data, how many civilians have been killed by this, no, because US never confirms that what of the attack and how many have died. Unfortunately, those who work on this, they will understand. You may identify a building, this is an Alpha building, from here, from one of the drones, but you cannot say who all are sitting inside. Then second scenario is that when you order a drone to drop a missile over the building, it may take 25 to 35 seconds depending on what height is your drone is there. And in 35 seconds, scenario can change. Your target may go out, some innocent persons can come inside. That is what happened in the case of drone. You may not identify the person or the vehicle correctly. In Afghanistan particularly, there have been a number of cases where the marriage parties have been attacked by drones. Traditionally, these persons, when they travel, they have the gun over their shoulders. What we have in India, in Haryana and Punjab, persons go, they carry their guns, even for marriage ceremonies. They have been wrongly identified and attacked by drones. And this is the data, if you see, those, so this is the, what is called the drone users have been, the main is the US, is Elite UK, Israel, Australia and Germany. The Australia and Germany have been actually used very few of them. They kept it a secret. Basically what they have done, when they are deployed in Afghanistan, they have used it as a training sortie something. With the help of the US and Canada, they trained their pilots using the live targets. And then it was never divulged. In case of Germany, it was a parliamentary question, it was raised, then only it was revealed that they have used one drone, lethal drone, in Afghanistan, killing few persons. Same has been the case with the Australia. Though generally it is not known that these countries have also used drones in Afghanistan. Number of killed, few situations. Afghanistan has been a very country where the persons who have been killed, very difficult to get this reliable data. Second is again Pakistan, where some attempts have been made by a number of NGOs, and in last around 10 years, those killed have been more than 3,700, injured around 1,600. Somalia about 165, and Yemen about 987. Figures may vary from different sources. The reason is that if you see the next point, there are 4 different agencies. They have estimated number of deaths and who all are involved. In the case of US, anybody killed between 16 to 60, he is considered a combatant. He may be his friend, brother, sister, anybody they feel is a combat age, so the person is a combatant or means enemy combatant, what they call it, or the insurgent. They do not say whether the person is nowhere related to the conflict. So that is why the figures have been varying in different countries and from different sources. By an estimate, more than 6,500 persons have been killed so far in last 10 years in the drone strike. Civilians have been major casualties because inability of drone to identify persons who are there. A sad thing is that the compensation, when some civilians are killed, US says sorry and pays them just $3,000. Sometimes maybe it is around 500, and if a house is destroyed, around $1,000. And compare it with the cost of one Hellfire missile, which has about $60,000 US. And in this case, the US pilot is safe. They don't have to answer anybody in the UN anywhere. And they say that this is a cost person has to pay, that we are having a continued fight against the terror, so these civilians have been killed. We have said sorry and paid them compensation. In fact, it is a cost Poles are paying for the misdeeds of somebody else. And this has been a major challenge for the international humanitarian law or otherwise international law. The UN has also taken few steps. They have appointed a special reporter who has been working on the violation of the human rights in these drone attacks in the Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, Palestine, and Somalia. His reports have, some of them have been submitted, and they have accused the US of violating rights of persons in these countries. Legality, the two main issues which are there, that the jus ad bellum, that the use of drones in other states' territory, there's an international law which is the use of force by states, and second is jus in bello, that is the how combat operation must be conducted using drones. But these are the issues we will consider, whether the drones do qualify these particular use of drone as well as the use of drone under the IHL, they qualify this or not. In international law, as the UN Charter says very clearly, the members of the UN shall refrain from threat, use of force against the territorial integrity of or political independence of any state, and in any manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. This treaty norm is a considered customary international law norm. And military action by one state in the territory of other state, not otherwise justified, is a violation of this prohibition under the international law. State may employ forces other than the state, like the US had done in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but when the governments have objected to it, it had no right to continue there. The legal dilemma is that when you conduct this territory without the permission of that state. In fact, the US has been objected by the Pakistan at least from last about 1 year, 1.5 years, and Afghanistan president has also very strongly objected to the use of this weapon. UN General Assembly has very clearly said that the use of force by state on the territory of other is an act of aggression. In self-defense, yes, one can use force. There is a customary law contained in Article 51 of the UN Charter, and it says it shall not impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense in a manner or the armed conflict otherwise against the member of the UN. And in the fact, when the US forces started using drone, they say we are using only in the self-defense. And then when in the 2002, when the conflict in Afghanistan was over, US had no right to continue there and using drones, which have been continuing last about 12 years. And worse has been the number of persons who killed has not been accounted by anybody, neither the local government nor the US forces, which is one of the obligations that immediately after the conflict supposed to search for missing and dead and give treatment to persons who require otherwise safety under the IHL. US has been justifying that outside in the context of armed conflict on the basis of right of self-defense, and this right is not unfettered. There is a lot of limitation how much you can use this right of self-defense, in particularly in other state. And then, for instance, the case of say Pakistan or Afghanistan, where the insurgents seek sanctuary. The right of the state to conduct military operations against these two countries is tempered by territorial states' denial. That is, the Pakistan or Afghanistan say that we are unable or we will not check these persons who are doing these anti-national activity against the US. And there has to be need to a process how a country can go ahead and use weapons in another country. That is the victim states. In this case, the US must first ask the sanctuary state to meet legal duty to ensure that his territory is not used for harm to his own country or countrymen. And if the state complies and removes the threat, neutralizes them, arrests them, depending upon what is the legal system is that, then it is not permissible for the US or any country to use force in other countries' territory. In case the state refuses or unable to do this thing, at the request of the victim state, maybe for two reasons. One is that lacks the capability to conduct the operation or not to do so. Clear? That is sometimes the US has been claiming. Then in that case, the victim state may act militarily in self-defense, or you can use drone or any other means and put an end to the unlawful activity. But this has not been the case in where the drones have been in the last about 8 or 10 years. There is also proportionality in just a vellum, is that how much and how long this force can be used. Now, when the state acts in a defense and employs force, then the requirements that the cross-border operations requirement limits the scale and nature of force employed. How much you can do, where all you can do. And for suppose there is a case of a target drone attack against the terrorist camp, in that there is no requirement for you to go and attack other places where the terrorists are not there. You cannot use the entire territory of the 5,000 square kilometer that say that the terrorists are there and keep killing them. There is a geographical limitation also, that is it will be unlawful to deploy forces in locations where the terrorists or insurgents are not there. And finally, this cross-border operation must be limited in the sense that cessation or the withdrawal of forces should be there when the threat is over in that particular part of the country. Second is IHL, or just in below, the principle of military necessity, distinction and proportionality remain applicable. Second, we will see what is the care and protection obligations of a state when the conflict is going on. Search and care of injured and disposal of dead, the obligation of not to spread terror, targeted killing, then how much and whether these drones cause these superfluous injuries, then the legal review of the new weapon and the command responsibility. These 7 points we will see under the IHL. Now, military necessity, proportionality and duty to have distinction between military and civil objects is one of the primary under customary international humanitarian law. It has been coming from ages that you cannot kill a civilian, always distinguish between military object and civilian objectives, other way around, and have to see that there is a military necessity to take on that object. Article 57(1) and Article 48 of Additional Protocol 1. And these fundamental rules are also principles of customary law that the ICJ had held in the case of the legality of nuclear weapon case. Then these three interrelated indivisible principles, they collectively provide sufficient protection to civilians in any armed conflict, whether it is international or non-international. Care and protection of civilians, the Article 57, AP1 says very clearly, attackers to take constant care to spare the civilian and civilian populations and objects. Second is that must do everything feasible to verify that objectives to be attacked are neither civilians nor civilian objects. Now, as much as that this additional protocol will say, when a pilot is going to attack a particular object and if visualizes that it is attack is not what he has been asked to do, then he can abort the particular attack, which has not been possible in the case of drone. Identifying a target sitting at a distance of 67 km with varying difficulties of weather conditions, it is a very difficult task for a person to identify in certainty and say that yes, this is the person to be taken down, or this is a vehicle to be taken down. Numerous cases have been in Afghanistan and Pakistan where innocents have been killed, children have been killed, or women have been killed. In fact, one of the case in Afghanistan in 2010, in a marriage party of 57 persons were going. Now, the US, the drone pilot thought that it is a case of insurgents are going, and they were in tractors. It fired the missile. First missile was fired. A few died in that. Others came to help the person who were injured. Immediately after about 2 minutes or so, second missile was fired. We call double tap. So those who were there to help out, they were also killed. In total, everybody in that group was killed. And the two persons who survived, one was the old man. He said that statement that I was holding the hand of my grandson, and when the missile was fired, there were blasts, and I was thrown out almost around 20 meters away. And that time still I was holding the hand of my grandson, but he was not there. So there have been numerous cases where such things happen. Civilians, children, women have been killed in these attacks. And the response had been few $1,000s to victims by the US and a letter of sorry to the president of the country. Search and care of injured. Those who are in the armed forces, my chairman will understand that this is one of the prime responsibility, that whenever you have an attack or a combat, it is duty to ensure that everybody thereafter is seen. Those who need medical attention are taken, and what we call the First Geneva Convention or Regional Protocol 1, and those who are dead, collected, individually buried, and information maintained and sent to ICRC, which is not happening in the case of these two countries or even the Yemen. The countries do not have any list. The US claim that all those who have been killed are combatant, and since you cannot account how many are killed, the data in the Afghanistan and US is still not complete, that how many persons have been killed by these drones in the last 10 years. Act of threat or violence aimed at spreading terror among civilian. If you see additional rule 2 of the customary IHL, you will find very clearly the second rule, you cannot use air force or air warfare materials to spread population against threat against the population. And there is a real photograph of Afghanistan around a year back, where the people are scared that the sound of that drone, they don't know whether and when they are going to fire missile from there. Target killing, in the two, that is the IHL and human right. If you see that though the term has not been defined in the IHL, the governments are required to justify that when they are using the fight against terrorism. And US has been used, in particularly US and Israel have been also using all the Soviet Union or Russia target killing, because it doesn't have any effect on harming own population. In armed conflict, when the war is on, you can kill a military commander, anybody whom you choose, pick up a gun and who is in front line, they can shoot him down, as long as he is a member of any armed forces, or civilian if he is directly participating in hostility. Though I little differ on the definition of DPH by ICRC, I see later, but then IC doesn't permit you kill anybody beyond this list. Outside the conflict, the targeted killing is only permissible when you conduct in human rights law. And human rights law say very clearly that you have to ensure that the let's come to the IHL, that you give the reasonable precautions, and then ensure that the civilian objects or civilians are not harmed while using target killing in the IHL. Human rights law, all situations applies, and killing is only legal when the object is threat to life to anybody. A police can kill a person, a dacoit it can kill, a robber it can kill after giving due warning, and after seeing that the capture is not possible, which is authorized in the legal system of all the countries. And there is also obligation to minimize the level of force by giving warning or the person surrender, which is not in the case of IHL. When we talk about DPH, today the theatre of armed conflict has been changing, and civilians are taking direct part in hostilities under various names. Though ICRC has tried to define the term, there are different opinion on this, the acceptability of the term. And one is that if you see the Professor William Disney, he said a person is not allowed to wear two different caps simultaneously, as a civilian and as a soldier, and who is engaged in military raids by night and by purporting to be an innocent civilian by day is neither a civilian nor a lawful combatant, and he is an unlawful combatant and can be lawfully targeted as an enemy. What the professor feels is, in fact, when you are in military, it's a very difficult situation for you to identify whether the DPH what time. But the question was raised in the morning, sometime relates to what he said about terrorists, though the word he used wrongly, but the armed forces and police do face a situation in identifying a person this way. I feel that it does not take into account the tactical realities of military operation as too narrow, and in fact the DPS definition gives a what we call the revolving door of protection to a person, that at one time half an hour you are a combatant, the remaining 23 and a half hour you are a civilian. So it's very difficult for a military person or on the ground combatant to visualize that which is the hour when you are not a combatant, because you also do not obey a law of war, that is wear uniform or identify yourself as a combatant even for half an hour. Professor Nanda, one of the Indian professor of international law, he also of the opinion that targeting or capturing in self-defense may occur outside the geographical limitations or outside the area of hostilities, as long as there is a strict compliance of necessity and proportionality. The lawful measure in self-defense are permissible. Some way he tries to limit what Christine had said. Under is the superfluous injuries or unnecessary suffering. Do the weapons used by drone, do they cause this particular type of injuries? If I take it back to the Hague Convention, the object of war is to weaken the military force of the enemy, and this would be succeeded by employing the arms which uselessly aggravate the suffering of men or render their death inevitable. And says further, use of such weapons or arms would be contrary to the laws of humanity. It is as old as 150 years, the St. Petersburg Declaration. If you see this, and a use of drone, in particularly hitting the target, I'll take you to a situation where the lethality is described as a real lifetime situation. In 2008, a Predator drone spotted a group of insurgents suspected of planting a roadside bomb near the American military outpost in Afghanistan. After identifying the militants, the Predator unleashed a Hellfire missile. It evaporated all but one of the figures digging in the dark. When the ground forces reached there to identify the crater caused by missile, all that was left was a shovel and a crowbar. You can't identify how many persons were there. Most of the places where drones have been used, there is no medical help available even for the person who are injured and sick. Who is there to identify through a DNA sampling for the person how many have been killed? One of the reasons that you are not aware how many have been killed. Legal review, yes, this is one of the important duty on every state contained in the Article 36 of Additional Protocol 1. Lloyd has said very clearly in the beginning. It's also a legal customary law which states are supposed to ensure that all the weapons or the means and method of warfare they use in conflict, they should adhere to the IHL, which is being signed and ratified by the countries. Then command responsibility also is one of the issue which is emerging, that it applies to commander which was using drone, and at all levels are accountable for the weapon they deploy, the method in which they employ them, and the consequences resulting from such employment. I guarantee that till date in the US or anywhere or UK, where the persons have been killed, innocent persons, no severe action against any military person has been taken. No person has been suspended or even put behind the bar for even killing civilians. The maximum penalty had been lowering the rank of military person or giving them warning letters or what we call administrative action against them. So the life of a poor person in Afghanistan or Pakistan or this region has been much low compared to the life stake which should have been at the pilot of the fighter aircraft. This has been saved because of this reason. One good news that the European Parliament has passed a resolution 2014, sometime month of February, about the drones, and is said that having regards to the unknown number of civilians, injuries and death outside declared conflict zone, and the report of the use of armed drone by the UN rapporteur, Emerson, which I mentioned on this particular aspect, released at least 3 times by now, last was September 2013, and they said, having regard to this, they have called upon the member states to oppose and ban the practice of using targeted drones in outside the combat zone, and also the member states to ensure the conformity with the legal obligations not to perpetrate unlawful targeted killing or facilitate killing by other state. And further, they include armed drones in relevant European and international disarmament and arms control regime. In my opinion, this weapon is not going to last long. In fact, when after First World War, the craze was in the world to have as much as possible chemical weapons. Clear? In fact, the US has amassed so much of chemical weapon. It is one of the countries which has failed to meet international obligation to destroy its chemical stockpile by 2009. This was an obligation taken by countries who have signed and ratified Chemical Weapons Convention. US and Russia are only 2 countries have not met their legal obligation. So the weapons keep developing, and then thereafter have been cluster munition. It was thought that this is again the master weapon. You don't require anything after that. Then came the nuclear weapon. These weapons have been phased out in the course of time, and I'm sure that very soon the use of this weapon in a war will end. Because you cannot use drones when 2 countries are fighting war and are equal. Drones cannot match a fighter aircraft because of low speed. If you've got a better air defense system and radar, track down these drones and destroy them. So what the countries are trying to get, like a monkey, everybody is trying to get a drone for this own paying the taxpayers' money. It is not going to be used by these countries under 5, 10 or 15 years, and unless it is then again faced by outdone by other new kind of weapon. So I don't feel that this weapon has got a more life, but what has been done in this situation has been violator of IHL. Adequacy of IHL, I feel that the drone has lot of challenges because of the sophistication and the way it has been used by the US in last at least decade. Otherwise, what law governs today is the aerial missile warfare laws, fundamental principles of IHL, customary rules of IHL, Geneva Convention, UN Charter are sufficient to control any weapon, whatever time we develop in due course of technology. To conclude, they are unique weapons. Now the systems, I won't say weapon for surveillance, they are one of the best weapon. One the system. In fact, in the what we had earthquake some time back, or any other natural calamity, they have been used by countries for very successful purposes. They have got very highly advanced and effective weapon system for a military commander. And though in law there is no prohibition use of the drone, because technology keeps on developing every time, but so far as they comply with the rules of IHL, they are legal weapons. Otherwise, the scenario in which they have been used is the violation of international law as well as IHL. And I feel that the few principles have been observed in that case also, the drones can be effectively utilized in a conflict, that the principle of necessity, not to use against if it is not required, then must be tried only against the lawful target. There is a combatant after you identifying them. Although it is a very difficult situation when you sit on a computer and your camera is 15,000 kilometers away, you can identify anybody having a lathi over his shoulder as a combatant, that he is holding a gun. If you want to look for a person who is 6 feet 2 inches, you can identify a wrong person as 6 feet 2 inches. That happened number of times when they are looking for a particular person in the Pakistan and Afghanistan. No double traffic strikes, because IHL allows giving care and protection to persons who have been injured. So the using the double tap or second, third successive attack by missile is the wrong thing by the US. Proportional balance, civilian military objects, then must be conducted only for the lawful combatant, because then there is the obligation that under the command responsibility action can be taken. What is being done in the US, the intelligence agency or CIA has been using, which is not normal norm in the international law. And responsibility to search after the attack is over, so that the person who are injured, who need care, or who are dead, they are accounted properly and decent burial is given to them. Before I end, the support I have taken from internet. The drone pink silver lining on the Rajasthani sky. The unarmed child is too far below pick an unmanned conscience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusei Jha. And Dr. Jha covered a lot of ground. One of the issues he talked about was transparency. A lot of this debate is being done without real facts and figures. As he reported, different groups tracking the death of civilians, the use of drones, have different numbers. So we're not sure what is the reality. He also talked about a state's right to self-defense and whether that extends after the immediate danger has been dealt with. He also talks about how drones are used and how they should comply with the principles of IHL, and the debate about whether to kill or capture people who are directly participating in hostilities. And you talked about whether or not DPH is an adequate reference for states to use. But one of the things he did do was announce the death of the drones in the near future. So we will look to see if that prediction is right. But most importantly, you did say that the law as it currently stands, IHL, is adequate because the technology has to comply with the law. It's not the other way. So thank you again. And now we're going to go to the next speaker. I'll introduce him and then get him on the phone. Dr. Sikandar Shah is a legal fellow at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. He's also an associate professor of law and policy at LUMS in LUMS University, Pakistan, and he's an expert on human rights and international humanitarian law. Sikandar was previously a Grotius Research Fellow at the University of Michigan Law School. His recent academic work has appeared in leading international law journals, including the American Journal of International Law and the Washington University Global Studies Law Review. He has actively advised bodies engaged in policy formulation in Pakistan. He earned a BA from the University of Michigan and received his Juris Doctorate with honors from the University of Michigan Law School. There are two publications I want to highlight that Sikandar has published. It's The Folly of Drone Strikes and The Legality of US Drone Attacks in Pakistan. So with that introduction, I think he got off Skype, so he's waiting for me to call. I will now give him a call. Yes, good afternoon, Dr. Shah. I've done your introduction, so I will give you the ears of the audience.
Excellent. Sorry, I somehow got disconnected, so pretty much listen to everything, and I will want to compliment what Professor John has sort of worked on, because there's a lot of commonality. I pretty much agree with most of what he said. So basically, the way I like to do this is because I think he's discussed a lot of legal, I don't know that the way I'm sort of inclined to discussing the legal issues, but also perhaps look at something as well as situate the drone sort of issue, the drone war, in a particular context, so that we can understand the effects it has on society as well. And so that how that leads to IHL would also be an interesting question to look at. So basically, can everyone hear?
Hold on. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. So I've been working on drones for a long time. I'm pretty much in the process of finishing a book, and I've looked at drones from pretty much every angle, legally speaking. I mean, I focused on the regulation of weapons concerns in international law. I've looked at arms women. King Taylor has also been a sensible look at. I've also looked at the domestic sort of infrastructure of a particular country and how it, when it has no control over what's happening on its territory, how does it deal with it, how does it tackle this issue itself. And then, of course, I have also looked at the humanitarian crisis that it generates. So I would like to start off with quickly about, because I think this is an interesting issue about IHL and the HR frontier, if that is there at all. And when drones are used as a weapon, what sort of challenges have come about and how international law has dealt with this particular issue. So, for example, it has been clearly apparent by the ICJ in the Israeli war case that IHL and HR complement one another and actually apply at the same time, and HR applies extraterritorially as well, which is an important point because I think there are both these areas of law are perhaps in certain areas they're more developed than others, and one can complement the other, as for instance in the case of torture, how human rights law can perhaps strengthen IHL law, and likewise IHL can strengthen HR in the context of, for instance, arbitrary detention or missing people. That is a general point. So I think we need to keep in mind that IHL law is as applicable as HR law is, and this lacuna that is created by arguing the application